When you think of Ion Storm, you probably think of Deus Ex or John Romero's Daikatana. However, there's a lesser known game that I'd like to shed some light on. My name is Barley, and this is Anachronox. So, what is Anachronox? Anachronox is a 2001 JRPG-inspired title created by none other than, well, Tom Hall. And if you don't know who Tom Hall is, then you've probably at least heard of some of his games. Games like Doom, Commander Keen, Wolfenstein 3D, and Rise of the Triads would all become staples of his legendary career. So how does someone go from making something like Doom to making a Japanese-inspired turn-based RPG? Well, if you were around in the 90s, you'd probably remember how much of a splash Squaresoft had made in the industry with such titles as Chrono Trigger and the Final Fantasy series. And if you're not familiar with these titles, they usually feature diverse casts of characters as well as huge sprawling semi-open worlds for you to explore. But what will make these RPGs stand out from others would be the turn-based combat that these games are built on. Much like the name implies, turn-based combat has both you and the enemy taking turns attacking each other, giving a sense of pre-planning and strategic coordination. These games were huge in the 90s. I mean, so big that you were seeing ads for them on cable TV.
The most anticipated epic adventure of the year will never come to a theater near you. Final Fantasy VII.
Squaresoft had left its mark on the world, and it clearly left a mark on Tom Hall, who was quoted saying, "Not since Keen has a universe been so clear in my head." Unlike the generally serious tones of the game that had inspired him, Tom wanted to bring a different kind of story to the world of JRPGs, one with humor, personality, and wit. What he ended up with was a colorful and story-rich universe of classic turn-based RPG combat that's full of memorable characters, fantastic music, and superb voice acting. But the question is, did he succeed?
Hit me. Hasn't there been enough of that? Have a heart.
The plot follows Sly Boots, a detective for hire down on his luck, who soon takes a job that ends up bringing him to the far reaches of the galaxy on a quest to save the universe. Whoa. Yep, that's pretty JRPG. And much like a JRPG, as you progress through the story, you'll come across colorful and diverse characters who will join you on your adventure. Whether you're looking for a genius scientist who uses taboo technology to overcome her enemies, a washed-up superhero, or an entire planet of people who shrunk themselves down to help your cause. That's real.
Shoot me.
It's like a goddamn Saturday morning cartoon.
And I miss Saturday morning cartoons.
They also feature world abilities, which can help you in varying ways outside of combat. For example, main character Sly Boots can lockpick doors, giving you access to new areas. Or Ro Bowman, who can analyze data and use it to solve mysteries. So much care and creativity went into these characters, and it shows in each and every corner of the story. And while I do find Anachronox's combat system to be a little underwhelming compared to the games that inspired it, I never really found myself getting frustrated or bored. At worst, I would probably just criticize that you end up crutching on the same abilities through most of the game. But don't get me wrong, there's a lot to be had here, because Sly and his comrades are some of the best written and performed characters that I've ever seen in a video game. There's so much charm to the writing and cutscenes that I just wanted to keep going to see what would happen to our heroes next. Whether you're stranded on a planet trying to solve a kidnapping case or being pressured by the mob for unpaid debts, there's so many quality moments that sit so well with me, and with good voice acting too. Well, mostly good voice acting.
No, please don't, Mr. Boots. I'm a good boy. Don't turn me off. No.
Hey, you're acting pretty funny.
Anachronox was a huge surprise for me as someone who misses turn-based RPGs and late 90s PC game aesthetic. I genuinely found myself rooting for the characters, and honestly, there isn't too many games I can say that about. So, with all that said, you're probably wondering why you haven't heard of this game. Well, let's rewind a bit and learn a bit more about Anachronox. Do you get the joke? The year is 1996. Close friends and ex-id Software employees Tom Hall and John Romero start a little studio together in Texas. They name it Ion Storm. Let's just say, Ion Storm was a pretty big deal when it was announced. With gamers having high hopes for their future titles, Ion Storm was set to be the next big thing. While Romero went off to work on his own project, Daikatana, Hall would begin work on Anachronox. It was meant to be his greatest creation, and now that he was at Ion Storm, he had the freedom to do so. Unfortunately, working at Ion Storm wasn't quite the dream it was made out to be. Between marketing controversies, Daikatana's poor reception on release, as well as delays from moving to a new engine and their eventual acquisition by Eidos, it was a rocky development phase to say the least. But the team stayed unfazed. Fast forward to 2001. Anachronox was finally getting close to its release date, albeit a few years late. However, there was a small issue. It still wasn't ready. The team would end up working 16-hour days for the months leading up to its release date. Fortunately, their hard work would end up paying off as the game did come out as planned. But it wasn't a happy launch. While the game garnered universal praise from critics, the sales numbers told a different story. And after the commercial failures of Daikatana, Anachronox, and Dominion, Eidos made the call to close down the Dallas branch of Ion Storm. The team would come back from vacation only to find pink slips waiting for them at their office. And that was the end of Ion Storm. And with it, the end of Anachronox.
Gary Sherwin here with startling developments in the controversial Planets Abroad campaign. The diplomatic program that has the entire planet engaged in a groundbreaking mission to save the universe and improve interplanetary relations has run into a disastrous snag.
The greatest minds of our galaxy, all dead and gone.
But there's a slight problem. Anachronox ends on a cliffhanger. Hall had written so much content that we only got to see the first half of the story, planning to leave the second half for a sequel or expansion. That was nearly 20 years ago. Since then, Eidos has been bought out by Square Enix. That's right, the same company that inspired this game now owns the rights to it.
It's like an ironic joke, but I'm not laughing.
So, what does this mean for fans of the game? I asked Hall what his plans were for a possible sequel to Anachronox, and apparently he's toyed with the idea of doing a Kickstarter, or even updating the original game with more content. But unfortunately, due to the grand size of Anachronox, that's easier said than done. Hall once mentioned that he would put the script online in 2020 if nothing had been done with the IP, and unfortunately, that's becoming the most likely of scenarios. While the idea of never getting to experience more Sly Boots and friends is saddening, I'm glad I stumbled upon Anachronox and gave it a shot. I truly do believe that there's nothing else like it, and there may very well be nothing else like it in the future. And that's okay. Much like there being only one season of Firefly, I'm just glad I got to experience it rather than not at all. And who knows, maybe down the road we may get to see Sly Boots make one more comeback to take us across the universe once more. I'm Barley, and this was Anachronox.